The most expensive meal I ever ate cost me $1,200 and tasted like nothing at all. Not because the food was bad. The food was excellent. The Harrington Hotel on Peachtree Street in Atlanta had a private dining room called the Candler Suite. Velvet curtains, low light, the kind of place designed to make whatever you were celebrating feel historic. My parents had chosen it for their 30th wedding anniversary. They wanted something intimate, my mother said. What she wanted was an audience. My name is Mark Brown, 35 years old, financial analyst at a mid-sized commercial real estate firm in Atlanta's Buckhead corridor. I am precise with money. I have to be. Because for the last 3 years, I have been running the financial infrastructure of a family that treats money the way a magician treats a volunteer from the audience, with complete disregard for what it costs them. My parents are Raymond and Carol Brown. Raymond spent 20 years in sales and retired early on the theory that the universe owed him a comfortable landing. Carol ran the household with the authority of a CEO and the accountability of none. They live in a 4-bedroom colonial in Sandy Springs, a house they have not been able to afford on their own since Raymond's retirement account took a significant hit in 2022, and he made the decision, without consulting anyone, to take a second mortgage to cover the gap. I covered the second mortgage, $3,500 a month, on a standing order that left my account on the first of every month with the mechanical certainty of a utility payment. It was not a loan. It was never discussed as a loan. It was simply what happened, the way certain things in families simply happen when one person is reliable and everyone else is something else. My brother Kevin is 38. He runs a consulting company that has been perpetually 6 months away from profitability for 4 years. My mother describes him as visionary. I describe him as expensive. I covered his legal retainer when his last venture ran into contractor disputes, $11,000 in August, which Kevin acknowledged with a text that said, "You're the best, bro," and which I have not seen repaid in any form. My brother Troy is 29. He is working on a second master's degree at Georgia State. My mother describes him as finding himself. I would describe him as well-funded, given that the tuition I helped cover last semester amounted to $8,000. I am not telling you this to make myself sound generous. I am telling you this because generosity implies a choice freely made. What I had been doing for 3 years was something closer to compulsion, the financial equivalent of feeding a machine you know is broken because you've invested too much to walk away. I arrived at the Harrington 20 minutes early on a Saturday evening in late October. I found the maitre d', confirmed the table, and handed over my credit card for the prepayment, $1,200. I signed the receipt the way I sign expense reports at work, mechanically, without joy. Then I found a chair near the window and waited for my family to arrive. They swept in at 7:15 like a weather system, loud, expensive, and slightly chaotic. Kevin was wearing a blazer that cost more than his monthly health insurance premium, which I knew because I had covered that too, 6 months prior when his company's group plan lapsed. Troy arrived looking rumpled and charming in the way that only the youngest child in a family is permitted to look rumpled and charming without consequence. And then my parents. My mother did not walk into rooms. She held court in them. She kissed Kevin on both cheeks, adjusted Troy's collar like he was 12, and then, without making eye contact with me, handed me her coat. Check the wine list. Mark, Kevin deserves a good bottle after his week. He's close to closing something major. I knew for a fact Kevin wasn't closing anything major. I had seen the email he forwarded me 2 days ago, asking if I could front the renewal on his business licensing before the deadline. I hadn't responded yet. I just opened the wine list and pointed at a Cabernet that wouldn't embarrass anyone. For the next hour, I sat at a table I had paid for and listened to my parents construct a version of our family in which their sons were men of vision and I was the support staff. My mother's eyes moved between Kevin and Troy with the particular warmth of a woman investing in something she believed in. When they landed on me, there was acknowledgement, not warmth. Acknowledgement, the way you acknowledge a functioning appliance. I had been the appliance for 3 years. Reliable, invisible, expected. My father gave a toast first. Something about 30 years of partnership, about building something that lasts, about family being the only investment that matters. He said it with conviction. My father was good at conviction. He was less good at follow-through, but conviction he had in abundance. Then my mother stood up. The table went quiet, the way tables go quiet when the person with the most gravitational pull in the room is about to speak. She raised her glass. Her diamonds caught the candlelight, the bracelet I had added to her insurance policy 2 years ago because she'd asked me to handle it, and I had. "To my boys," she said. Her voice had the particular tremor of a woman performing emotion for an audience. "Kevin, for your vision, for building something from nothing and never giving up." Kevin nodded solemnly, the way people nod when they are being toasted for things they haven't actually done yet. "Troy, for your heart, for reminding this family that growth takes time and patience." Troy smiled. Then she turned to me. The warmth left her eyes. Not gradually. It switched off, the way a light switches off, and what replaced it was something I had spent 35 years cataloging without naming. A cold, performative pity. "And Mark," she said, loud enough for the servers to hear, "thank you for handling the logistics tonight. You've always been the practical one." She smiled. "It's just a shame you're too transactional to understand what real family love looks like. But we do appreciate the check." The room went dead silent. Kevin smirked into his wine. Troy studied the tablecloth. My father looked at his plate. I sat very still for 3 full seconds. I was not going to cry. I was not going to raise my voice. I was not going to give my mother the scene she had engineered this moment to produce. I was going to do something she had never once prepared for. I picked up my phone. I opened my banking app. The interface was familiar. I used it the way I used every professional tool, with efficiency and without sentiment. Cancel standing order. Mortgage payment. Confirm. Cancel auto pay. Kevin's insurance. Confirm. Cancel recurring transfer. Troy's tuition fund. Confirm. 45 seconds. 3 years of financial infrastructure. Dismantled, I set my phone face down on the table. I raised my finger toward our server. "Cancel the prepayment on my card," I said, "and bring the check to the table. Drop it in the center." The server looked at me, then at my mother, then back at me. He nodded and disappeared. My mother was still wearing the smile. She was waiting for me to react, to apologize, to qualify, to perform the gratitude she had spent years conditioning me to perform on command. She was waiting for the appliance to restart. When the server returned and placed the leather check folder in the dead center of the white tablecloth, it sat there the way a statement sits, waiting to be answered. I picked it up, opened it, glanced at the total. $1,242. I took out the itemized receipt, folded it once, and set it in front of my mother. "Perfect," I said. I looked her directly in the eyes for the first time that evening. "Then don't ask me for any more money." I stood up, smoothed my jacket, picked up my car keys. I did not look back. I walked out of the Candler suite, down the carpeted corridor of the Harrington Hotel, and through the revolving door into the cool Atlanta night. I didn't know it yet, but what I would find 3 days later would make that dinner look like a minor disagreement. The drive home was 40 minutes on I-285. I made it in silence. No radio, no podcast. Just the sound of the interstate and the particular clarity that comes when you have finally stopped pretending something is okay. My hands were steady on the wheel. My mind was running the numbers with the involuntary precision of a man who cannot stop being an analyst even when he is in the middle of his own life. $38,000. That was my conservative estimate of what I had moved through my family's accounts over 3 years. The monthly mortgage, $3,500, 36 months, $126,000. Except I had started the payments in month 8 of Raymond's retirement, so the real number was closer to $110,000. Plus Kevin's legal retainer, $11,000. His insurance, $2,800 over 6 months. Troy's tuition, $8,000 last semester, $6,000 the semester before. The $22,000 my father had borrowed in 2022 to cover the margin call on a brokerage account he hadn't told my mother about. Money he had called a short-term loan, with the sincere conviction of a man who genuinely believed it. Money I had never seen again. I was not a generous brother. I was not a devoted son. I was a slot machine that had convinced itself it was a person, feeding coins into a game rigged against me, waiting for the lights to flash, waiting for them to finally see me. By the time I reached my apartment in Brookhaven, my phone had 17 notifications. My father, you humiliated your mother on the most important night of the year. I have never been more ashamed. Call us immediately and make this right. Kevin? Seriously, Mark. We can't cover that bill. You know that. Why are you doing this? It's their anniversary. Then a Facebook notification. My mother had posted a status update, vague enough to be deniable but pointed enough to draw blood. Sharp is the tooth of an ungrateful child. Prayers for a son who has let money change him into someone I no longer recognize. I read it twice, set the phone down on my kitchen counter. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about the bill and the narrative. I switched modes. The son who had spent 35 years waiting to be seen was done. The financial analyst was in charge now. I sat down at my kitchen table and opened my laptop. 3 days after the dinner, I was on a call with a friend named Brent, a real estate attorney who specialized in property transactions and had the particular useful quality of being someone I trusted to be honest rather than kind. I had asked him a direct question. Could someone legally transfer a property title without notifying a third party who was making mortgage payments on it? Brent was quiet for a moment. It depends on how the mortgage is structured. If the third party isn't on the mortgage note, just making voluntary payments, they have no legal claim to notice. Technically, yes. And if the new owners don't notify the bank, most mortgages have a due on sale clause, Brent said. If the title transfers without lender approval, the bank can call the full balance immediately. But they'd have to find out first. A pause. Why are you asking me this, Mark? I'm going to answer that in about 10 minutes, I said. Can you stay on? I opened the county property records portal for Fulton County, Georgia. The platform was public. Anyone could search it. I typed in my parents' address in Sandy Springs. The most recent recorded document was a quitclaim deed, filed 11 days ago. Grantor: Raymond Brown and Carol Brown. Grantee: Kevin Brown and Troy Brown. I stared at the screen. My parents had transferred the title of the house to my brothers 11 days ago, while I was still paying the mortgage, while the standing order was still active, while I was sitting at a dinner table being thanked for handling the logistics. They had moved the asset to the Golden Children and left the liability with me. They intended for me to keep paying $3,500 a month on a house I would never own, would never inherit, and had never been offered any stake in. Brent, I said, still here. I found a quitclaim deed. My parents transferred the title to my brothers 11 days ago. My standing order for the mortgage was still active. Dead silence on the line. Mark, I know. That's not a family drama, Brent said carefully. That's potentially fraud. At minimum, it's a deliberate attempt to keep a third-party funder in place after a material change in ownership. Do you want me to look at the full document? I already canceled the standing order the night of the dinner, I said. Another pause. Then, quietly, good. I didn't know it yet, but the bank was going to find out about that quitclaim deed in a way that would bring my entire family to my front door. I did not call my parents. I did not forward the document to Kevin or Troy. I did not send a letter or a message or make any move that would signal what I now knew. I had spent 3 years being the family's reliable infrastructure, the one they counted on, without questioning, the one who fixed problems quietly, in the background, without recognition or reciprocity. Now, I was going to let the infrastructure simply fail. Without the monthly mortgage payment, the account would fall behind in 30 days. By 60 days, the bank would issue a delinquency notice. By 90, foreclosure proceedings would begin. I set a reminder in my calendar for each milestone. Not to do anything, just to know. The delinquency notice arrived 42 days after the dinner. It was sent to the Sandy Springs address. But because my email was still linked to the mortgage portal as a courtesy contact, something I had set up when I first started making payments, a digital alert also pinged my inbox at 7:23 on a Tuesday morning. Payment past due. Foreclosure proceedings may be initiated if payment is not received within 30 days. I read it. Archived it. Went to work. If you've made it this far, do us one quick favor. Subscribe. A lot of people watch without ever doing it, but it costs you nothing and means everything to us. Thank you. Genuinely. They showed up on a Thursday evening 6 weeks after the dinner. I was in my apartment in Brookhaven, on my couch, reading, in a room that was quiet and clean and entirely mine. The building concierge called up. "Mr. Brown, your family is in the lobby. 4 of them." "Send them up," I said, "but escort them to the elevator. Don't leave them in the lobby unattended." I set down my book. I was not nervous. I was not angry. Anger is a hot emotion. It burns fast and leaves a mess. What I was feeling was something closer to absolute zero, cold and complete, and very, very still. When I opened the door, they looked like a different family than the one that had sat around a candlelit table 6 weeks earlier. My mother's signature blowout was deflated. My father looked older than I remembered, his face gray in a way that had nothing to do with lighting. Kevin and Troy stood slightly behind them, not meeting my eyes. My father spoke first. "We need to talk." The bank called. "They're threatening to take the house." "I know," I said. I did not invite them in. I stood in the doorway. A deliberate choice, the same way a contractor stands at the threshold of a building they're assessing, keeping the structure at a professional distance. "You have to do something, Mark." My mother stepped forward. Her eyes were red at the edges, but I had spent 35 years watching her perform distress, and I knew the difference between her grief and her panic. This was panic. "That house is our home. It's where we raised you. How can you stand there and let this happen to your own family?" "You stopped paying," Kevin said from behind her, finding some borrowed courage now that his inheritance was in foreclosure proceedings. "You had an obligation. You can't just walk away from a commitment." I looked at Kevin. He was wearing a new watch. Not expensive, but new. Flashy enough that he'd made a discretionary purchase sometime in the last 6 weeks. "I didn't walk away from my mortgage," I said. "I don't have a mortgage." I stepped back to the entryway table and picked up a manila folder. I had prepared it the morning after my conversation with Brent. I held it out to my father. He took it, opened it. I watched his face as he read. My mother leaned over to see. She went rigid. Kevin stopped shifting his weight. Troy, for the first time all evening, actually looked at me. "That's a copy of the quitclaim deed you filed 11 days before the anniversary dinner," I said. "You transferred the title to Kevin and Troy. Legally. On record at the Fulton County Courthouse." The hallway was completely silent. "You moved the asset to your golden children," I continued, "while the liability, $3,500 a month, stayed with me. You intended for me to keep paying a mortgage on a house I would never own, never inherit, and had no legal interest in. Mark, listen." My father's voice had lost its conviction. It had been replaced by something smaller. "We were trying to protect the asset. Estate planning. We were going to tell you." "When?" I asked. "After I'd paid it off." No answer. I looked at my brothers. "Congratulations. You're homeowners." I let that sit for a moment. "That means the mortgage is your responsibility. The foreclosure is your problem. The asset is yours. So is the debt. We can't pay that." Troy's voice cracked. "I'm still in school. I don't have that kind of money." "Then sell it," I said. "Or lose it. Either way, it has nothing to do with me." My mother grabbed my arm. Hard. Her fingers dug in with the desperation of a woman who has just realized the mechanism she has depended on for years has finally stopped working. "You are destroying this family over a dinner bill," she said. "Over a few words. Have you no loyalty? No love? We are your parents." I looked at her hand on my arm. Then I looked at her face. Really looked, the way I hadn't let myself look in years. There was no love in her expression. There was no grief. There was only the raw, exposed panic of someone whose supply chain has just been interrupted. "I didn't destroy anything," I said. I removed her hand from my sleeve gently but completely. "I just turned on the lights." I stepped back into my apartment. I closed the door. I threw the deadbolt. The sound of it engaging was the most satisfying sound I had heard in 3 years. The foreclosure proceeded with the indifferent efficiency that banks bring to these situations. Without the monthly payment, the account fell further behind. My brothers, who had on paper owned the house for 6 weeks, had neither the income nor the intention to cover a mortgage they hadn't asked for. Kevin explored refinancing options and found, predictably, that his credit history made lenders skeptical. Troy called me twice. I did not answer. 6 months later, the house in Sandy Springs was sold at auction. My parents moved into a 2-bedroom rental on the other side of Atlanta. Thinner walls, laminate countertops, a parking lot instead of a driveway. It was entirely adequate. It was what they could afford without someone else paying for it. Kevin relocated to another city to pursue a new venture. Troy moved in with a girlfriend and became significantly harder for my parents to reach. Once the house was gone, once the asset had evaporated and there was nothing left to inherit, the devotion that had always pointed toward the golden children pointed somewhere else, toward whoever was funding whatever came next, which, for the first time in 3 years, was not me. I want to tell you what I learned, because this channel uses stories to teach things, not just to entertain. And the thing I learned is worth more than $38,000. I learned that the people who exploit reliable family members are not doing it out of love. They are doing it out of fear. My stability, my ability to fix problems, cover shortfalls, maintain the infrastructure, cast a constant harsh light on the people around me who couldn't or wouldn't do the same. My mother did not dismiss me because I was unlovable. She dismissed me because my competence made her sons look like what they were. I was the mirror she needed to shatter to maintain the story she was telling herself. Understanding that did not make it hurt less, but it made it make sense. And sense, when you've been confused for a long time, is its own kind of relief. I also learned that stopping is not the same as failing. I stayed for 3 years not because I was generous, but because I was afraid. Afraid that walking away meant admitting I had been wrong about them, wrong about what family was supposed to mean, wrong about the investment I had made. I was waiting for the payoff that was never going to come. The machine was always broken. The only thing I had control over was when I stopped putting coins in. I stopped at a dinner table on a Saturday evening in October. I raised a glass and said one sentence, and then I walked out into the Atlanta night and drove home and started living my own life. 6 months after the dinner, I booked a trip. 2 weeks in Portugal, Lisbon and the Algarve coast, solo, nothing to manage, no one to bail out, no standing orders to maintain. I sat in my apartment the morning before the flight. My phone was quiet. My bank account was whole. My calendar had nothing on it for 14 days, except things I had chosen. I thought about my mother calling me transactional, about the diamonds I had insured on her wrist, about the house that was now someone else's problem, about Kevin's watch and Troy's diploma that was still pending after 4 years of tuition payments. I did not feel bitter. Bitterness is just love that has nowhere to go. I was done sending it to that address. I closed my laptop, picked up my bag. The door of my apartment closed behind me with a soft, certain click. I was not invisible anymore. I was not the appliance. I was not the safety net or the standing order or the logistics coordinator for a family that had mistaken my reliability for inexhaustibility. I was Mark Brown, and I was, finally, the one person in this story who was free. If you liked this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more family-centered accounts like this.